The story of Prophet Muhammad's night journey and ascension, known as Al-Isra wal-Miraj, is one of the most profound and miraculous events in Islamic history. It marks a pivotal moment in the Prophet's life, one that strengthened his resolve and deepened his connection with Allah. This extraordinary journey was not just a physical one, but a deeply spiritual experience that offered divine insight, heavenly encounters, and a direct communion with the Creator. During this miraculous event, Prophet Muhammad was transported from Mecca to Jerusalem in a single night, an event referred to as Al-Isra. From there, he ascended through the heavens in what is known as al-Miraj, reaching a realm beyond human comprehension. This journey was a gift from Allah, occurring at a time of immense hardship and sorrow in the Prophet's life. He had recently endured the loss of two of his greatest supporters, his beloved wife, Khadijah, and his uncle, Abu Talib. These losses, compounded by the hostility of the Quraysh and the rejection he faced in Taif, left him in a state of deep grief. In the midst of these struggles, Allah granted him this divine experience, reassuring him that he was not alone, that his mission was of the highest purpose, and that he was under divine protection. The significance of this journey is immense. It was during Al-Miraj that the Prophet was granted the most important commandment in Islam, the 5 daily prayers. This momentous event not only confirmed his status as the seal of the prophets, but also established his leadership over all previous prophets as he led them in prayer at Masjid Al-Aqsa. His encounters with past prophets and his vision of the unseen world, including glimpses of paradise and hell, provided him with an even deeper understanding of the ultimate fate of humanity. Despite its miraculous nature, the night journey was met with skepticism by many of the Prophet's contemporaries. For them, the idea of traveling such an impossible distance in one night was beyond belief. However, for those with faith, it was a moment that reinforced their trust in the truth of his message. The unwavering belief of Abu Bakr, who immediately accepted the Prophet's account without hesitation, earned him the title As-Siddiq, the truthful. This event, though incredible, was not meant to be judged by the limitations of human understanding, but rather by the limitless power of Allah, who is capable of all things. The story of Al-Isra wal-Miraj continues to be a source of inspiration for Muslims, reminding them of the power of faith, perseverance, and divine mercy. It is a testament to the boundless might of Allah and the honored status of Prophet Muhammad, who was chosen for this sacred journey. It reinforces the significance of prayer as the direct link between the believer and the Creator, a gift given on that very night. Through this event, Allah not only comforted His messenger, but also offered a timeless lesson in faith, devotion, and the unseen realities of the hereafter. Before the miraculous journey of Al-Isra wal-Miraj took place, Prophet Muhammad was enduring one of the most difficult periods of his life. The years leading up to this event were marked by deep sorrow, hardship, and increasing hostility from the people of Mecca. His unwavering dedication to spreading the message of Islam had made him a target of persecution, and despite his patience and perseverance, the opposition from the Quraysh continued to intensify. The loss of two of his most beloved supporters, his wife Khadijah and his uncle Abu Talib, further compounded his struggles, leaving him feeling deeply vulnerable. Khadijah had been more than just a wife to the Prophet. She was his confidant, his source of comfort, and the first person to embrace Islam. Throughout the early years of his mission, she stood by his side, offering unwavering support and encouragement. Her love and devotion provided him with strength in the face of adversity, and her passing left a void that was immeasurable. Shortly after losing Khadijah, he was faced with another devastating loss: his uncle Abu Talib. Though Abu Talib never accepted Islam, he had been the Prophet's protector, shielding him from the relentless persecution of the Quraysh. With his passing, the Prophet found himself exposed to even greater danger, as the tribal protection that had once kept him safe was no longer guaranteed. As the opposition in Mecca grew fiercer, the Prophet sought refuge elsewhere, traveling to the city of Taif with the hope that its people might be more receptive to his message. However, instead of welcome and acceptance, he was met with hostility and humiliation. The leaders of Taif not only rejected him, but also incited the town's children and outcasts to pelt him with stones, causing him physical pain and emotional distress. Bleeding and exhausted, he sought shelter outside the city and turned to Allah in supplication, expressing his grief while reaffirming his trust in the divine plan. It was in this moment of despair that Allah sent Jibril, accompanied by the angel of the mountains, offering to crush the people of Taif as retribution. However, the Prophet, embodying his mercy and patience, refused to call for their destruction, instead praying that their descendants might one day embrace Islam. Despite the rejection and pain, the Prophet remained steadfast in his mission. However, the increasing difficulties weighed heavily upon him. It was at this lowest point, when grief and hardship threatened to overwhelm him, that Allah granted him a gift unlike any other. The night journey and ascension was not just a miraculous event, it was a divine reassurance, a means of strengthening the Prophet's heart and renewing his resolve. It was a reminder that despite the trials of this world, his mission was divinely ordained and that he was under the care and protection of the Almighty. The journey was not only a personal gift to the Prophet, but also a turning point in the history of Islam. It provided him with a vision of the unseen, of the greater realities beyond this earthly life. It reinforced the divine authority behind his mission and offered him a glimpse of the rewards and punishments that awaited humanity in the hereafter. At a time when he felt abandoned and rejected, Allah brought him into his divine presence, elevating him above all creation and affirming his status as the seal of the prophets. This event served as a bridge between the most difficult period of the Prophet's life and the eventual triumph of his mission. Though the people of Mecca continued to reject him, the Prophet's faith remained unshaken, and his determination to spread the message of Islam only grew stronger. Not long after, the groundwork for a new phase in his mission would be laid, leading to the eventual migration to Medina and the establishment of the first Islamic state. The night journey and ascension was, in many ways, a precursor to this new beginning, a moment of divine intervention that reassured the Prophet that he was never alone, that his hardships were not in vain, and that Allah's plan was unfolding exactly as it was meant to. One night, as Prophet Muhammad lay resting in the sacred city of Mecca, an event unfolded that would forever change the course of history. Without warning, Angel Jibril appeared to him, awakening him for a journey that no human had ever undertaken before. This was the beginning of Al-Isra, the first part of his miraculous journey. As the Prophet stirred from his rest, he saw Jibril accompanied by an extraordinary creature, Al-Buraq. This magnificent, radiant being was unlike any animal known to mankind, described as being larger than a donkey, but smaller than a mule, pure white in color, and endowed with the ability to cover vast distances with the speed of lightning. With each step, its hooves landed as far as the eye could see, making it the perfect mount for a journey beyond imagination. Jibril instructed the Prophet to mount Al-Buraq, and as he placed his foot in the stirrup, the creature trembled. It resisted for a brief moment until Jibril rebuked it, reminding Al-Buraq that it had never before been ridden by anyone more noble in the sight of Allah than Muhammad. At this, the creature calmed, and the Prophet set forth on a journey that defied all logic and the physical limitations of the world. With Jibril guiding him, they moved with supernatural speed, covering the vast distance between Mecca and Jerusalem in a matter of moments. As they traveled through the night, the Prophet witnessed extraordinary sights. The landscape beneath them passed in a blur, but there were moments where he paused to observe. He saw caravans traveling across the desert, some of which he would later describe upon his return as a proof of his journey. He also passed by sacred places, each holding great significance in the history of the prophets before him. At one point, Jibril instructed him to stop and pray. When he finished, Jibril informed him that he had just prayed at the blessed site of Medina, the city that would one day welcome him and become the center of the first Islamic state. They continued onward, and again he was told to dismount and pray. This time it was at Mount Sinai, where Prophet Musa had once received the divine revelation. Moving further, they stopped again, and he prayed at Bethlehem, the birthplace of Prophet Isa. Finally, he reached a place where he was instructed to pray one more time, and he was told that this was the grave of Prophet Musa, who had longed to be buried near the Holy Land. The Prophet continued his journey until he reached his destination, Masjid Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, known as the farthest mosque. This place held a deep connection to the legacy of the prophets, and it was here that a momentous event took place. As the Prophet dismounted and entered the sacred precincts, He found himself in the company of those who had come before him, a gathering of all the prophets. Adam, Noah, Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, and many others stood before him. He was then chosen to lead them in prayer, an act that symbolized his role as the final messenger, the seal of the prophets, the one who completed the message that had been delivered through the ages. As he stood at the front and led them, he was not merely participating in an ordinary prayer. He was affirming the continuity of divine guidance and establishing his leadership over all of humanity's spiritual guides. After the prayer, Jibril presented two vessels before the prophet, one filled with milk and the other with wine. He was asked to choose, and he instinctively reached for the milk. Jibril smiled, affirming that he had chosen the path of purity and natural inclination, the fitra, signifying that his ummah would remain upon the straight path of divine guidance. Had he chosen the wine, it would have been a sign that his people would go astray. The journey from Mecca to Jerusalem had been an unimaginable feat, something no human being could accomplish in a single night. Yet the prophet had done so under divine command. This miraculous event was already beyond human comprehension, but it was only the beginning. What lay ahead was even more profound, a journey beyond the physical realm, beyond the limits of the earth and sky, into the vast expanse of the heavens. The Isra was the foundation, a passage through the sacred lands that connected the past with the present, reinforcing the link between the prophet and all those who came before him. But the Miraj, the Ascension, would take him to places no human had ever seen, to heights beyond the reach of any living being. As the prophet stood in Masjid Al-Aqsa, reflecting on the magnitude of what had transpired, he was prepared for the next phase of his journey. He had already witnessed the extraordinary, yet what awaited him would be even more awe-inspiring. With Jibril by his side, he prepared for the Ascension, the moment when the heavens would open before him and he would witness the divine in ways that words could never fully capture. The night was far from over, and the prophet was about to embark on the most sacred and unfathomable part of his journey, the journey beyond the stars, into the divine presence of Allah himself. As Prophet Muhammad stood in the sacred precincts of Masjid Al-Aqsa, he found himself surrounded by an assembly unlike any other. Gathered before him were the prophets who had come before him, men chosen by Allah across different eras and nations to guide humanity toward the truth. These were the messengers who had each carried the divine message in their time, calling their people to worship Allah alone, enduring trials and hardships in their respective missions. Now in this extraordinary moment, they stood together in a single congregation, united under the leadership of the final messenger. Angel Jibril gestured toward the prophet, signaling for him to step forward. Without hesitation, he took his place at the front, and behind him stood the noble prophets of Allah, waiting for him to lead them in prayer. It was an act that carried immense significance, for it established beyond doubt that he was the seal of the prophets, the culmination of divine revelation, and the leader of all those who had ever been sent to guide mankind. The scene itself was a manifestation of the unity of divine guidance, a testament that all prophets had carried the same essential message, the oneness of Allah. As the prayer commenced, the prophet stood at the front, leading those who had once guided entire nations. Among them was Prophet Ibrahim, the father of monotheism, who had built the Kaaba and laid the foundations for true faith. There was Musa, the one who had spoken directly with Allah, who had led his people out of oppression and stood firm against Pharaoh. Standing among them was Isa, the son of Maryam, the messenger who had performed miracles by Allah's will and called his followers to righteousness. Alongside them were Noah, the patient warner who had called his people for centuries, and Yusuf, known for his wisdom in trials. Every prophet who had been sent to deliver Allah's message was present, standing shoulder to shoulder in this divine gathering. As Prophet Muhammad completed the prayer, he turned to see them standing behind him. Some narrations describe how he recognized and greeted them, taking in the momentous sight of those who had preceded him. He saw Musa, a tall and strong figure with a commanding presence, his face reflecting the struggles he had endured against Pharaoh's tyranny. He saw Isa, a man of radiant beauty, with glistening hair as though he had just emerged from water, his demeanor reflecting both humility and strength. He saw Ibrahim, whom he physically resembled the most, standing with the noble dignity of one who had been tested and found steadfast. This was not a dream or vision. This was reality, a divine gathering where all the messengers bore witness to the final prophet's leadership. The significance of this moment extended far beyond that night. It was an affirmation that the message of Islam was not a new or separate religion, but a continuation and completion of what had come before. It confirmed that the Prophet Muhammad was not merely another messenger, but the one whom Allah had chosen to finalize the chain of prophethood. His leadership in this prayer symbolized his role as the guide for all of humanity, carrying forward the same message that had been entrusted to those before him, but now in its most complete and perfected form. The presence of the prophets also served as a divine reassurance. The prophet had endured immense hardships in his mission: rejection, persecution, the loss of loved ones. Yet here he was, standing among those who had experienced similar struggles. Musa had faced defiance from his own people. Isa had been denied and betrayed. Nuh had preached for centuries and was met with ridicule. Each of them had suffered in their mission. Yet they had remained steadfast, and now they stood behind him, affirming that he too was on the path of truth. In that congregation, there was no distinction between one prophet and another, except in the role that Allah had assigned them. Some had been sent to specific nations, others to entire regions. But Prophet Muhammad was sent as a mercy to all of mankind. While each prophet had guided his own people, he had been chosen to guide all of humanity. The prayer at Masjid Al-Aqsa was more than just an act of worship. It was a moment that defined his place in the divine plan. After the prayer, Jibril presented him with two vessels, one filled with milk and the other with wine. Without hesitation, he chose the milk, upon which Jibril remarked that he had chosen what was natural and pure, symbolizing the fitra, the innate disposition of righteousness. Had he chosen the wine, it would have been a sign that his nation would go astray. This simple choice carried profound meaning, indicating that his followers would remain on the straight path, adhering to the natural way of faith and submission to Allah. Though the experience in Masjid Al-Aqsa was already beyond human comprehension, it was only the beginning. The prayer with the prophets was a prelude to an even greater journey, one that would take him beyond the earthly realm, past the known universe, and into the highest heavens. His body and soul were prepared, his faith strengthened, and his place among the messengers affirmed. With the prayer completed and the blessings of the prophets upon him, he was ready to ascend beyond what any human had ever seen. The heavens awaited him, and the next phase of his journey was about to begin. As Prophet Muhammad stood in the sacred Masjid Al-Aqsa, having led all the prophets in prayer, he prepared for the next stage of his miraculous journey, the ascension through the heavens. Angel Jibril stood beside him, signaling that the time had come for him to embark on an experience no human had ever undertaken. The journey thus far had already been beyond comprehension, but what awaited him would transcend the limits of the earthly realm, carrying him beyond the stars, beyond time, and into the divine presence of Allah himself. Jibril led him toward a magnificent structure where a pathway to the heavens was prepared for him. As they began their ascent, they approached the first gate of the heavens, a vast and imposing barrier between the earthly world and the celestial realms above. At the entrance stood a gatekeeper, a mighty angel whose duty was to guard the passage. Jibril called upon the gatekeeper, requesting permission to enter. The angel, in accordance with divine decree, asked who was seeking entry. When Jibril introduced himself and confirmed that he was accompanied by Prophet Muhammad, the gatekeeper inquired whether the prophet had been invited for this journey. Upon hearing that this was indeed the divine will, the gates opened, revealing the vast expanse of the first heaven. As the prophet entered, he was greeted by a great figure, Prophet Adam, the father of humanity. Adam stood tall and majestic, his presence radiating wisdom and dignity. Upon seeing the prophet, he welcomed him warmly, offering his greetings of peace. He expressed his joy at meeting his noble descendant, affirming the high rank that Allah had bestowed upon him. As the prophet observed Adam, he noticed something extraordinary. Whenever Adam looked to his right, he smiled with joy, and whenever he turned to his left, he wept in sorrow. Jibril explained that on his right were the souls of those destined for paradise, and on his left were those bound for hellfire. The sight of the righteous brought him happiness, while the fate of the doomed filled him with sadness. After exchanging greetings, the prophet was led further upward, passing through the heavenly expanse to the second level. Upon reaching the second heaven, the same process unfolded. The gatekeeper questioned their presence, and once permission was granted, the door swung open. There the prophet encountered two noble prophets, Yahya, the son of Zechariah, and Isa, the son of Maryam. Both welcomed him warmly, offering their prayers and blessings for his journey. Their presence carried a deep significance, for Isa had been one of the last messengers sent before him, and his return was prophesied as a sign of the final days. With their greetings exchanged, the prophet was led further, ascending beyond what any living being had ever witnessed. At the third heaven, the prophet met Yusuf, the son of Yaqub. Yusuf's beauty was unparalleled, so striking that it seemed as if he had been given half of all beauty in existence. His radiant appearance reflected his noble character and unwavering faith, despite the trials he had endured in his life. Yusuf greeted the prophet with warmth, recognizing the one who would complete the message of divine truth. Their meeting was brief, but its significance was profound, as Yusuf embodied the strength of patience and the fulfillment of Allah's promises. Continuing his ascent, the prophet reached the fourth heaven, where he encountered Idris, the prophet known for his deep wisdom and divine elevation. Idris was unique among prophets, having been raised to a high station by Allah's command. He welcomed the prophet, blessing him and acknowledging the greatness of his mission. The journey then carried him to the fifth heaven, where he met Harun, the brother of Musa. Harun's presence exuded warmth and kindness, reflecting his role as a supportive guide to his people. His meeting with the prophet symbolized the importance of brotherhood and compassion in leading a nation. The prophet's ascent continued to the sixth heaven, where he encountered Musa, the great messenger of Bani Israel. Musa's presence was commanding, his stature reflecting the strength with which he had confronted Pharaoh and led his people to salvation. When he greeted the prophet, he did so with deep reverence, recognizing the significance of his mission. However, as the prophet moved past him, Musa began to weep. When asked why he was crying, he expressed his sorrow that despite having led a great nation, the followers of the prophet Muhammad would outnumber his own in paradise. It was a moment that highlighted both Musa's dedication to his people and the immense blessing that had been bestowed upon the final messenger. At last, the prophet reached the seventh heaven, the highest of the celestial realms. Here he was greeted by the father of monotheism, Ibrahim. The great patriarch stood with his back against Al-Bayt al-Mamur, the celestial counterpart to the Kaaba, where 70,000 angels worshipped each day, never to return. Ibrahim, the one who had built the Kaaba on earth, was now honored with its heavenly counterpart. He welcomed the prophet with immense love, affirming the continuity of their shared mission, to call humanity to the worship of Allah alone. He conveyed a message for the prophet's followers, instructing them that the soil of paradise was lush but unplanted, and that their remembrance of Allah would serve as the seeds that would blossom into their eternal reward. Beyond this point, there was no one else to meet, no realm left to traverse except the final boundary, Sidrat al-Muntaha, the lote tree at the farthest limit. This tree marked the division between creation and the divine realm, beyond which no being had ever passed. It was a sight beyond description, its trunk immense, its leaves vast, and its beauty beyond comprehension. The prophet observed colors and lights unlike anything on earth, as the tree stood adorned with divine manifestations. It was here that Angel Jibril stopped, for even he, the greatest of all angels, could go no further. He turned to the prophet and told him that this was his limit, beyond which no creation could pass. If he proceeded beyond this point, he would be entering the presence of Allah himself. With the permission of his Lord, the prophet moved beyond the limits of creation, experiencing a divine nearness that no human had ever known. The details of this encounter remain shrouded in mystery, for the prophet later revealed little about what transpired. What is known is that in this sacred moment, Allah directly communicated with him, granting him the commandment of the 5 daily prayers. Initially, 50 prayers were prescribed, but as the prophet descended and met Musa once more, he was urged to return and request a reduction, as Musa knew from experience that the people would struggle to fulfill such an obligation. The prophet returned multiple times, each time requesting a decrease, until the number was reduced to 5, with a reward of 50. This meeting with Allah was the pinnacle of the journey, a moment of profound significance that reaffirmed the prophet's role as the chosen messenger. Having received this divine decree, he began his descent, retracing his journey through the heavens. As he passed by each prophet once more, he conveyed to them what had been decreed, with Musa still insisting that the number of prayers was too great. However, the prophet, feeling a sense of humility and gratitude, decided to accept what had been granted, for the matter had been set by the divine decree. As he returned to Masjid Al-Aqsa, he remounted al-Buraq and was swiftly transported back to Mecca. The journey that had transcended time and space was completed in a single night, yet its significance would echo throughout history. He had seen the unseen, spoken with his Creator, and witnessed the vast realities beyond this world. His return to Mecca marked not the end of the experience, but the beginning of a renewed mission. The prophet had been given the greatest reassurance. His message was divinely ordained, his struggles were known to Allah, and his path was leading toward the fulfillment of a grand and sacred destiny. Beyond the highest heaven, where no soul had ever ventured, Prophet Muhammad arrived at the threshold of the divine realm. Before him stood Sidrat al-Muntaha, the lote tree at the farthest boundary, a creation of unparalleled beauty and magnificence. Its vast branches stretched beyond sight, its leaves immense and radiant, its fruit glowing like celestial lanterns. It was not just a tree, it was a marker, a sacred boundary between the created world and the divine. No being, neither angel nor prophet, had ever crossed it. Even Angel Jibril, the most honored of the celestial beings, stood still, unable to proceed. He turned to the prophet and with profound humility informed him that this was his limit. If he went any further, he would be consumed. Only the prophet was granted permission to go beyond, to step into a realm that no created being had ever entered. The air around Sidrat al-Muntaha shimmered with divine light, and its surroundings were veiled in a mystery that could not be described by human words. The prophet witnessed dazzling colors unlike anything on earth, hues that shifted and glowed with an ethereal radiance. A divine presence filled the space, overwhelming yet comforting, powerful yet serene. It was an experience beyond time and beyond human perception. What lay ahead was not meant for ordinary eyes, nor could it be comprehended by a limited mind. It was a place where the laws of existence changed, where the barriers of the material world faded into the unseen. As the prophet moved forward, a profound stillness enveloped him. In that sacred realm, he experienced a divine nearness unlike any other. He heard the sound of the divine pen writing, recording the decrees of Allah, inscribing what was destined for all creation. It was a moment of direct encounter, not one of physical sight, for the prophet later clarified that he did not see Allah with his eyes, but he stood in his divine presence, veiled by light. The radiance of Allah's majesty was such that no being could withstand its intensity. If the veil were lifted, the entire creation would be consumed. In this celestial meeting, Allah decreed for the prophet and his followers the most sacred of obligations, prayer. Initially, 50 daily prayers were prescribed, a number reflecting the immense significance of worship in Islam. Prayer was not merely an act, it was a direct connection between the servant and his Creator, an intimate moment of divine remembrance. As the prophet received this command, he was filled with awe, knowing that it was both a blessing and a responsibility for his ummah. Upon his descent, he encountered Prophet Musa, who inquired about the revelation he had received. When the prophet informed him of the 50 prayers, Musa, with his wisdom and experience, urged him to return and request a reduction. He explained that his own people, the children of Israel, had struggled with far fewer prayers, and he knew that the followers of Muhammad would find it difficult to uphold such an obligation. Encouraged by Musa, the prophet returned to the divine presence and humbly requested a reduction. Allah, in his infinite mercy, lessened the number. Once again, Musa advised him to seek further reduction, knowing that humanity, by its nature, would struggle with a heavy burden. The prophet ascended and descended multiple times, each time receiving a reduction, until the number was brought down to 5 daily prayers. Even then, Musa urged him to ask for more relief, but the prophet, feeling a deep sense of humility and gratitude, chose to accept what had been granted. Allah, in his boundless generosity, decreed that although the prayers were now 5 in number, they would carry the reward of 50, ensuring that the mercy of the original command was preserved. This divine encounter was the pinnacle of the journey, a moment that confirmed the Prophet's unmatched status in creation. He was the chosen one, the beloved of Allah, granted an honor no one else had ever received. In that sacred space beyond the limits of creation, the final seal of prophethood was affirmed, and the greatest commandment was delivered directly without an intermediary. The descent from this realm was unlike any other journey. The Prophet had witnessed the unseen, heard the decrees of destiny, and stood in the presence of the divine. As he made his way back, he carried with him the knowledge of what he had seen, but there were things he could never fully describe. Some realities of the divine realm were beyond language, beyond expression, meant only for the heart to comprehend. Returning to the highest heaven, he passed by each of the prophets once more, sharing with them what had been ordained. Musa, upon hearing the final number of prayers, still expressed concern, but the prophet was content. The divine decree had been set, and he knew that what Allah had commanded was perfect in its wisdom. The significance of this journey was not just in what he had seen, but in what he had received, an eternal gift for his ummah, a means by which they could connect with their Creator every single day. The return through the heavens carried a sense of completion. The Prophet had traversed realms unknown, spoken with prophets of the past, and received a direct command from Allah himself. Yet as he descended, he knew that the true test of his mission lay ahead. He had to return to the world, to face the disbelief of the Quraysh, to endure the challenges of his people rejecting what they could not comprehend. He had to take what he had seen and use it to strengthen his call, to remind humanity of their greater purpose. As he passed through the celestial realms one last time, he caught glimpses of paradise and hell, seeing the rewards of the righteous and the punishments of the wicked. The rivers of Jannah flowed with beauty beyond imagination, while the torments of hell were terrifying in their severity. These visions were a reminder of what lay beyond this life, a confirmation of the truth he had been sent to deliver. Finally, he returned to Masjid Al-Aqsa, where Al-Buraq awaited him. Mounting the celestial creature once more, he was transported back to Mecca, where his body and soul reunited in the place where his journey had begun. It was as though no time had passed, yet what he had experienced was beyond time itself. The Prophet had journeyed through the cosmos, reached the farthest boundary, and stood in divine presence, all in a single night. This miraculous journey was more than an event. It was a testament to the boundless power of Allah, the ultimate reassurance to the Prophet in his most difficult times, and a reminder to his followers of the reality of the unseen. It was a gift to the Ummah, an invitation to seek closeness to their Creator through prayer, and an affirmation that the message of Islam was divinely ordained. No longer was there any doubt. The Prophet Muhammad was not just a man calling to faith. He was the chosen one, the final messenger, the one who had stood closer to Allah than any creation before him. As Prophet Muhammad descended from the highest heavens, he was granted visions of the unseen realms, paradise and hell, realities that awaited humanity beyond the confines of worldly existence. These glimpses were not mere symbols or illusions, but actual manifestations of divine justice and mercy, reinforcing the eternal consequences of human actions. He beheld paradise, a realm of indescribable beauty, a place of eternal peace where the righteous would reside. He saw rivers flowing with pure water, milk that never spoiled, honey sweeter than anything on earth, and wine that brought no intoxication. The fragrance of Jannah filled the air, a scent more delightful than any known to mankind. He saw lush gardens, towering palaces, and trees so vast that a rider could travel under their shade for 100 years. The inhabitants of paradise were in a state of bliss, their faces radiant with joy, free from sorrow, pain, or toil. Angels welcomed them, and their Lord showered them with his mercy, rewarding them for their faith and righteous deeds. He saw those who gave in charity, those who spoke kind words, and those who upheld their prayers, all receiving endless rewards beyond imagination. Their garments shimmered like the stars, and their voices resonated with praises of Allah. basking in the eternal pleasure of their Creator. But as he moved further, his heart grew heavy with the next sight. He was shown the depths of hell, the abyss of torment prepared for those who defied their Lord and turned away from his guidance. The fire raged with an intensity beyond comprehension, fueled by the sins of those who had rejected the truth. He saw angels of terrifying appearance, carrying out the punishments decreed upon the wicked. He witnessed those who had consumed interest in usury struggling to stand, their bodies bloated and unsteady. He saw those who had engaged in backbiting and slander, scratching their faces with nails of copper, their suffering unrelenting. He passed by those who had stolen from orphans, their bellies swollen with fire, weighed down by the consequences of their greed. He saw adulterers enduring unbearable torment, and liars with their mouths torn open repeatedly, punished for the corruption they had spread. Among the most chilling sights was the massive figure of Malik, the guardian of hell, whose expression was one of pure severity. Unlike the other angels, he did not smile or greet the prophet with warmth. He had never known laughter, for he had witnessed nothing but the punishment of sinners from the moment he had been created. Even as the prophet looked upon him, Malik's face remained stern, a reminder of the unfathomable horror that awaited those who chose defiance over submission. The prophet saw all this not to terrify, but to warn, to awaken those who would listen, to remind humanity that their choices carried eternal weight. These visions were not distant possibilities. They were realities awaiting every soul based on the path they chose in this life. He had seen the reward of faith, and he had witnessed the consequence of heedlessness. As he continued his descent, these images remained with him, shaping his call to mankind, urging them toward the mercy of Allah before it was too late. As the journey reached its conclusion, Prophet Muhammad was returned to Masjid Al-Aqsa, where Al-Buraq awaited him. He mounted the celestial creature once more, and in an instant, he was transported back to Mecca. His body and soul were reunited, and as he opened his eyes, it was as if no time had passed. The world around him remained unchanged, yet he had seen and experienced realities beyond human comprehension. He had traveled through the heavens, met the prophets, witnessed paradise and hell, and stood in the divine presence of Allah, all within the span of a single night. The next morning, as the prophet sat in contemplation, the enormity of what he had experienced weighed upon him. He knew that sharing this event with the people of Mecca would invite ridicule. The Quraysh had already dismissed his message, calling him a sorcerer and a madman. How would they believe that he had traveled to Jerusalem and ascended to the heavens in a single night? But the truth could not be hidden. When Abu Jahl, one of his greatest enemies, saw him and noticed a change in his demeanor, he mockingly asked if something had happened. The prophet responded with certainty, telling him of his journey. Abu Jahl, seizing the opportunity to make a spectacle of what he considered an outlandish claim, gathered the people of Mecca to hear it for themselves. As the prophet recounted his experience, laughter and disbelief filled the air. The Quraysh jeered, insisting that if he had truly been to Jerusalem, he should describe it in detail. Though he had never visited it before, Allah granted him a vision, allowing him to see the city as though it were before his eyes. He described its landmarks with astonishing accuracy, leaving his challengers speechless. Still, they refused to believe, dismissing it as sorcery. Among the believers, however, was Abu Bakr, who upon hearing the prophet's words, immediately affirmed them. Without hesitation, he declared that if Muhammad had said it, then it must be true. He reminded the doubters that he already believed in something even greater, that divine revelation descended upon him from above the seven heavens. From that day forward, Abu Bakr was honored with the title As-Siddiq, the truthful, for his unwavering faith. To further prove the truth of his journey, the prophet spoke of caravans he had seen along the way. He described their locations and the events that had transpired, even mentioning one caravan that had lost a camel. Days later, when those same caravans arrived in Mecca, the people found that every detail he had shared was true. Yet despite the undeniable proof, most of the Quraysh still refused to believe. Their hearts were hardened, their pride preventing them from accepting the truth. Though many rejected his words, the journey of Al-Isra wal-Miraj was not meant to convince the disbelievers. It was a divine gift, a source of strength and reassurance for the prophet as he continued his mission. He had been granted knowledge of the unseen, a glimpse into the greater reality that awaited beyond this fleeting world. With renewed faith, he carried forward the message of Islam, knowing that despite the mockery of the Quraysh, his journey was a sign from Allah, a miracle that would be remembered until the end of time. The night journey in Ascension was not merely a miraculous event. It was a moment of profound significance, carrying deep spiritual and practical implications for Prophet Muhammad and his followers. It came at a time of great hardship, when the Prophet had endured unbearable sorrow and rejection. The loss of Khadijah, his beloved wife and greatest supporter, along with the passing of his uncle Abu Talib, left him vulnerable both emotionally and politically. His failed attempt to find refuge in Taif resulted in humiliation, as he was driven out by the townspeople and pelted with stones. He was at one of the lowest points in his mission, facing opposition from all sides. It was at this moment that Allah chose to grant him this extraordinary experience, one that would reinforce his faith, renew his strength, and remind him that his struggle was not in vain. The journey affirmed his unique status as the final messenger of Allah. By leading all the prophets in prayer at Masjid Al-Aqsa, he was established as their leader, the one who carried the culmination of divine revelation. Islam was not a new faith, but the continuation and completion of the message delivered by all prophets before him. This moment symbolized the unity of divine guidance, demonstrating that every prophet had carried the same fundamental truth, the oneness of Allah. It was now his responsibility to deliver the final message to all of humanity. One of the greatest gifts of this journey was the commandment of prayer. Unlike other obligations, which were revealed through Angel Jibril, the 5 daily prayers were given directly to the Prophet in the divine presence of Allah. This alone signified their immense importance. Initially commanded as 50 prayers, they were reduced to 5, yet their reward remained as though 50 were performed. This divine decree was a mercy, ensuring that worship would be at the center of a believer's life while remaining manageable. Prayer became the direct link between the servant and his Creator, a constant reminder of the journey beyond this world. Through it, believers could experience their own spiritual ascension, reconnecting with the divine in the same way the Prophet had on that miraculous night. The journey also served as a test of faith for the people of Mecca. When the Prophet relayed what had happened, the Quraysh mocked him, ridiculing the very idea of traveling such an immense distance and ascending to the heavens in a single night. Many doubted, but the true believers stood firm. Abu Bakr, without hesitation, affirmed the truth of the Prophet's words, earning him the title As-Siddiq, the truthful. This event separated those who believed in the unseen from those whose faith was bound by their limited understanding of the world. It was a defining moment, demonstrating that true faith required trust in the power of Allah, even when something seemed impossible by human standards. Another profound impact of the journey was the Prophet's first-hand experience of the unseen realms, paradise and hell. He did not merely hear about the rewards and punishments awaiting humanity. He saw them with his own eyes. He witnessed the beauty of Jannah, its flowing rivers, its lush gardens, and the joy of its inhabitants. He also saw the torments of hell, where the consequences of sin were laid bare. These visions reinforced the reality of the hereafter, making the warnings he delivered to his people even more urgent. He returned with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing with certainty what lay ahead for those who accepted the truth and those who turned away. Beyond the immediate impact on the Prophet, Al-Isra wal-Miraj held a lasting message for his followers and for future generations. It reminded them that trials and hardships were temporary and that patience and perseverance would lead to ultimate success. Just as the Prophet had suffered greatly but was honored with this divine experience, believers were taught to remain steadfast in their faith, trusting that relief and reward would follow. It demonstrated that even in moments of despair, Allah's wisdom was at work, preparing something greater. The journey also emphasized the sacred connection between Mecca, Jerusalem, and the heavens. Masjid Al-Aqsa, as the destination of the night journey and the site where the Prophet led all other prophets in prayer, was given a special status in Islam. It became one of the 3 holiest mosques, a place of deep spiritual significance. This connection between the earthly and the divine reinforced the idea that faith was not confined to one place or one people. It was a universal truth meant for all of humanity. For the prophet himself, the experience was transformative. He had been reminded in the most direct way that he was under divine protection, that his mission was destined for success, and that the hardships he endured were part of a greater plan. He returned to Mecca with renewed strength, prepared to continue his call despite the rejection he faced. Soon, new opportunities would arise, leading to the pledge of the Ansar and the eventual migration to Medina, where Islam would take root and flourish. In every way, Al-Isra wal-Miraj was more than just a miracle. It was a turning point, a sign of divine reassurance, and a lesson in faith, perseverance, and the limitless power of Allah. It remains one of the most extraordinary events in Islamic history, a source of inspiration for all who reflect upon its meaning. It teaches that even in the darkest of times, Allah's wisdom prevails, and that those who trust in Him will be guided toward light, both in this life and in the next. May Allah guide us to the truth, strengthen our faith, and grant us understanding. May we take inspiration from the life of Prophet Muhammad and strive to follow his example in sincerity and devotion. Until next time, may peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.